Well, welcome to our great museum. Come right in. Before we go into the museum rooms, I'd like to show you this photograph, this picture. Actually, it's an oil painting that was done by the mother of three brothers who went off to war. George on the left was killed at Antietam on September 17th, 1862, the first major battle really in the Civil War. And Charles on the right was with Butler's division in New Orleans, Louisiana, and he died from disease. The drummer boy survived. He was, as you can see, the 19th Regiment, and so this is quite a painting. It needs work. We understand that. So we are trying to get funds raised to do that. You see the horse right there? And usually when you go through a town square, if you see a statue of a rider on a horse and the horse's head is down, it usually means that the rider was killed in battle. So if the head is up and they look normal, that usually means that the rider survived. They became a veteran. And we hope that we'll get it worked on eventually in the hopefully near future. So now you've seen this, and so we're going to go up to the rooms, museum rooms, and get an idea what's here. After we climbed those 22 stairs, which, by the way, were the original states in the start of the Civil War for the northern side, 22 states. But we are here now, and we caught our breath. And in here, this is known as the library, also the Lincoln Room, AKA Lincoln Room. But this library was built for the museum, actually for these gentlemen that used to meet here. The organization was formed in 1866, and they started meeting regularly in 1867. And they rented space throughout the city. And then finally, in 1885, they finally came up with enough money, $30,000, to buy this land and build this building. And so the building was dedicated in April of 1886. And so, you know, it's quite elaborate. The library was a great place. Some rooms in the back there where they could play cards and so forth. Alcohol wasn't allowed on this floor, but they did have some alcohol downstairs, but we won't get into that. The library here, when they built the building, the architect, a gentleman by the name of Kelly, had this bookcase here, and it was empty. So what are we gonna do about the bookcase? They didn't really have the money to buy books at that time. So they asked around, and they asked their lady friends, the wives and so forth, and they would help them out. So the ladies volunteered, and they came up with the idea of having Frank and Bean suppers in the basement hall downstairs. And price of admission was one book. And long story short, that's how they built this bookcase. And there are some interesting books in here, including the official records of the Civil War. That was actually produced by Congress around 1900, turn of the century. Henry Cabot Lodge was our senator, and he asked the printing office if they would kindly send some over to the museum here. So they mailed them to Henry Cabot Lodge in Nahant, Massachusetts. And back then, he was a senator, so there was no postage. But the books were mailed to him, and there were actually 2 sets of books mailed. So he brought them both down here, and all 162 volume set times 2. When they put them in the bookcase, all those books have wrappings on them. So they took the wrappings off the first set of books, and they kept it on the second set. And in this showcase here, Years ago, we cleaned out the bookcase and we repaired the wall behind it. And we discovered those books that are all wrapped up. And they are here, they're behind these books. There's a couple right here, you can see, and it's quite interesting. Of course, Henry Cabot Lodge's name is on there. And in trust for the Grand Army of the Republic for this post. This was one of the first posts in Massachusetts, post number 5. So it was the 5th one that was formed here. This is after Boston, I think went up a few other places. But the history, a brief history of the Grand Army of the Republic, as we know, was founded by Dr. Benjamin Stevenson from Illinois, Aurora, Illinois. And he came up with the idea of what amounted to eventually as the very first veterans organization in the United States of America. It's the Grand Army of the Republic. So he wanted a place with some of these veterans. You know, it's hard to go home and tell your family what you saw and what you did, but you can come over here and you can talk with people that went through the same stuff. So basically, the idea was for your comrades to talk to your comrades and so on. We do have a few artifacts related to Abraham Lincoln, and walk with me and I'll show you a couple of things. This is a note I want to show you from Abraham Lincoln, and it's dated November 7th, 1861, so it was during the Civil War years, the battle years. And in this note, A. Lincoln is asking the Secretary of War, Stanton, to appoint Brigadier Surgeon Boyd Pennington of Virginia as a surgeon of the brigade. And so this is very interesting. He's got his trademark signature, A. Lincoln. So that's one thing that we found right here in the building. And as far as it's been authenticated as as being real. Okay, so being in the Lincoln Room, I would be amiss if I didn't show our great general, that Lincoln's favorite general, actually, and that's Grant. And he was our 18th president. He followed Johnson, who's the one that took over for A. Lincoln when Lincoln was assassinated. So he was a president for 2 terms, General Grant. This is a picture of him shortly before he passed away. And he died about the same time this building was built, in 1885, 1886. And this is taken in Mount McGregor, New York, Saratoga Springs, which is upstate New York. And you know, the thing is, he wasn't at Gettysburg. He went to the Eastern Front after Gettysburg. And so his theory in tactics was basically to live with a short supply line. He would try to limit the supply line so he won't slow the army. And General Sherman in Georgia, realizing that, he actually did away with the supply line, and he had the railroad tracks that basically would take supplies in before he went to pillage and destroy the tracks and so on. He also lived off the land, and so by doing that, he was able to travel very fast. And he wasn't very well liked in the South. Okay, so here we have a few articles that belong to General Grant. We have a few pictures of him. We also have the official memoirs, which were actually written by Samuel Clemens, the author of Huckleberry Finn. So it's pretty interesting. So we have that here. This is a picture of the Coliseum that was built by these veterans. And you remember I said that the building was dedicated in 1886. So that's about the same time the Coliseum was finished. And so they had many shows there, the veterans. So the Coliseum had a skating rink in it, which is, you know, pretty interesting. It was a way for them to make some money. We had a bowling alley in the basement here. which is another way to make money. And basically what they made, what they took in, it went right back out. It was just charity. And we were everything that came in, we had, I believe it was 12 wardens that would go throughout the city and check with the widows and so forth of the veterans to see if they needed anything. And many a time we did find some records, and many a time some of the widows got cords of wood and so forth for the winter. So that's an interesting thing. Another interesting thing, going back before the building was finished, was in those years that they rented space throughout the city for those 19 years, starting in 1866, when they formed, was they had a little bit of a lottery here. And so they would give prizes on the lottery and so forth. But some people in Washington, D.C. learned about this, and it was illegal to have a lottery that went in various cities and towns. So they came up here to talk to these gentlemen about this lottery, and they acknowledged them, they yelled, and so on. And when these gentlemen that came up here got back down in Washington, D.C., they told General Grant, who of course was our 18th president, and he said, "They did what? You did what?" Two of the people that were involved with the lottery here were medal lottery recipients, and we're going to show you their pictures upstairs. So he just said, these guys are heroes. Just leave them alone. But they did tell them, this is it for the lottery. But they kept the profits they made. They didn't have to pay any fines or anything. And those profits helped raise that $30,000 that it cost to do this building here. So moving on. Before we go into the soldiers' room, I just want to show you a few more things here in the Lincoln Room. Okay, so over here we have a bust of our 16th president, actually the first Republican president, but back then the Republican Party is like the Democratic Party today. But anyway, so this is Abraham Lincoln, 16th president, and here we have A. Lincoln after he was assassinated, and those would be his pallbearers, and they're very important people, Secretary of the Navy, Army, and so forth. So I just want to show you that. And one thing I want to mention quickly is that a lot of these pictures we found when we came in here, actually some of the old-time trustees, Gil Lazon, Ed Gerard, a few others, when they came in, a lot of these pictures were in the basement. And the basement had a tendency to flood a lot. But they did a great job. And thanks to them, these pictures were saved. So now it's part of our collection, part of our history. Let's take a walk into the soldiers' room. Here we are in the soldiers' room, and I want to show you a few things of interest. To me, everything here is interesting. And this is Andersonville Prison, and this is in Georgia. So being in Georgia down south, it housed Union prisoners. And I believe Lynn had about 30-some POWs that were at this camp. This POW camp was the home for 50,000 POWs, prisoners of war, or Union prisoners. And 15,000 died there, mostly from disease and so forth. And you can see that there's a line right here, and this is called the deadline. And the idea is that if one of these soldiers, sailors, or Marines touch that line, which is about 10 feet in from the main gate, the main wall, then you would be shot. And so sometimes it's so much misery for some of these gentlemen that they would go and crawl to the line and touch it on purpose. So here we have a guard right there shooting one of the prisoners that dare to touch the line. But you can't imagine, well, I guess you can, but the misery that these gentlemen went through. This water, this river right here, was their drinking water, their bathing water, everything. They washed this pots and pans there, what pots and pans they had. And you can see it, this is all downstream. So these are the guards, the Confederate guards. And you can see they have first use, because this is downstream, of the water. And also, all these trees they chopped down for two reasons. One, they needed the wood, and two, it'd be hard to escape from here. You're wide open. And so the commander of this camp, Captain Woods, was tried and executed for war crimes. But didn't they say afterwards, you know, it really wasn't his fault. It's a war of attrition, and at this point, the South was losing. So the South they didn't have enough supplies. And of course, they would feed the guards first. So these poor POWs, they were lucky to get a piece of bread per day or whatever. So they went through a lot of mystery. And dysentery is a result of drinking this water for many of these children, and a lot died from that disease. So you can look around this, when you come and visit us in person, you'll see that we have quite a few pictures of Andersonville itself. There's Captain Woods in the corner. This is something right here that's pretty interesting. They have what they call raiders, and the raiders were actually Union prisoners. And they took advantage of all the other Union prisoners that they could, as much as they could, for what they had for supplies and so on. They were all rounded up, and Captain Royce had them hung. And this is a picture of them being hung. So they weren't worthy men, so to speak. They preyed on the weak, and so they were taken care of. So this is the POW camp, prisoner of war camp. And it's much like Stalags in Germany in World War II. The Stalags all had a deadline, a line you could not touch. If you touched it, then they would shoot you. So before you got to the barbed wire. As we know, we have the Stars and Stripes, and that was the Union side, and the Stars and Bars, which is the Confederate side. And this is the last Confederate flag to fly over Richmond. And in 1887, the Ladies' Post, and this is 1 year after this building was dedicated, the Ladies' Post had a gathering with the women of the Ladies' Post in Richmond, Virginia. And as a gift, they exchanged flags. So that's how we received the Stars and Bars. And they have our Stars and Stripes. I just want to show you a couple of pictures that were taken at the Henry Cabot Lodge estate. All right, so this is taken at the Lodge estate on June 18th, 1887. And it's right there of members of the G.A.R. Post 5, and where the Robert E. Lee camp visited on that date. So now these gentlemen, they came down to Virginia to visit the Robert E. Lee camp, the Confederate veterans. And this is a picture taken from there, dated July 5th, 1887. So they went down for the holidays of July 4th and so on. And remember, July 4th pertained to both North and the South. And really the Civil War is what got this country back together again. Abraham Lincoln said that a house divided cannot survive. And he was talking about the North against the South. One thing I wanted to mention before we go into the next room is this badge. That's a badge that was given to participants from both sides, the Confederate and the North side, when they met here at the Henry Cabot Lodge, and also down south at the Virginia Lodge. So this is something I wanted, and it says the Robert E. Lee Camp, so that's for the Confederate veterans, and it mentions the Post 5. So, and they did that quite a lot. If you had a national encampment, you may get a badge. And they had them all over the place. Chicago, they had one in Boston in 1900. They had a couple in Boston, but that was the first one. We also had the Navy, and it was their job to, for the most part, to run a blockade along the entire East Coast as well as the Gulf of Mexico to stop supplies coming in to service the Confederate forces. So they were also involved with battles. The famous battle in New Orleans that was commanded by Admiral Farragut, who said that they made all the textbooks, jam of torpedoes, full speed ahead. And he's really talking about mines when he says torpedoes. That was a term for mines back then. But so he was our first admiral, and we have from his ship, we have the porthole from the USS Hartford, and that was Admiral Farragut's flagship. And you can see the porthole. Trust me, it's very heavy. So we have a porthole from the Hartford. We also have what they call, well, we have a deck cleat, and that would be used to tie up the ropes when you pull the port, or when you leave or whatever. It keeps the ship right against the pier, you know, for the waves and so forth. Here we have a dead eye, and a dead eye's job was to keep the rope together, the ropes for the sails. So this is the Navy branch, and would you believe that we also had the first aerial reconnaissance in history? And during some of the battles, the North employed balloons, hot air balloons, to look at the enemy, basically to spy the enemy, to get up high and look. And so that was the first idea of air reconnaissance. And in some cases, they would throw down little bombs or whatever. But it really wasn't a factor, but it's just something that was a first in the Civil War. Many, many firsts. Okay, so we are now in the second part of the Soldier's Room. And there's a few articles of interest here. We have 2 logs and a tree branch. And in those branches, as well as the logs, grape shot, regular shot, shrapnel, and 58 caliber bullet. And here we have, here's the bullet right here, and the shrapnel from a bomb. We have a cannonball that got stuck into that log. And there's another cannonball right here, and that's also got shrapnel. So the thing is that when you have these battles, the stuff flies every place. It'll fly into flesh, as well as the trees, the ground, and so on. And these were taken from the Spotsylvania courthouse area. And we know there was quite a few skirmishes and battles around the courthouse there. We also had a get-together for a former trustee, and you probably know Ed G.A.R, or remember him. But here, this was given to me by the family of the G.A.R family for the museum here. And I remember asking them, where's the cat? And I got a little bit of a laugh for that. Anyway, so that's a ramrod. It's much like a musket ramrod, except it's much bigger. So here we have in this showcase a few projectiles and so forth. And I want to show you this to show you something about these cannonballs. And you know, at the start of the Civil War, they basically had smoothbore, and many of the muskets were smoothbore as well as the cannon. And they started thinking, you know, these balls that fly out of the smoothbore, they can't knock the bricks and so forth off the forts. So they started thinking, well, we got to do something about that. So they came up with the idea of having the inside of the cannons and the muskets grooved, and so it's like a spiral. So when you fire the shot, they change the shot so that it's concave like that. And when you fire that, it spins in the barrel and it spins out. So it gives you greater distance plus more power. When you get to the target, you're spinning, you're coming straight in. So that was able to penetrate the walls of many forts and so on. So it's just another invention of the Civil War. We do have some other artifacts here. This is a bullet embedded in a tree from the Battle of Little Round Top. And we all know about Joshua Chamberlain, 20th Maine, and how he saved the day at Gettysburg. So we also have back here is what we call a muddy water canteen. And somebody on the north side made a lot of money selling these. And they were supposed to work real good, but they really didn't work. The idea is you put muddy water on one side, and the other side going through charcoal, it will come out clean. But you have many swamps in the south, and really the water is kind of dirty sometimes. So I think they went back to boiling water. But anyways, so we have that muddy water canteen. So we also have here, this is a bugle that was used to play taps, of course. And this was actually, I think it was part of the 8th Regiment. Yes, it is, the 8th Regiment. And that's J.D. Bedell. And the 8th Regiment is actually from this area. So they were part of the first call. We have a few other items of interest. This is it's sort of like a compass. So when you fire the cannons, you can line up the enemy. And they would use that for the cannons. And we have other things. Here's a piece of a Confederate battle flag, the 28th North Carolina. And so it was captured. And, you know, if you captured the enemy flag, that was considered quite a noble act. And sometimes you might be awarded our nation's highest honor for that. So as we move around, I just want to show you what we have over here. I want to show you these pictures right here. This is basically the casualties of war, the cost of war, and so forth. You can see it's, some of these guys have so much damage to them. These gentlemen were shot in the face, and luckily the bullet went through the cheek, so it just didn't explode inside the body. These 58 caliber bullets were really lead, and they weighed pretty good, 58 caliber. And when they hit you, instead of going through you, they would stay inside and they would basically bounce around. So if you were shot in the legs or the arms, the odds are very good that you will lose your limb. And if you were shot in the stomach, there were stories of soldiers from Gettysburg. They wrote home to their family, "Dear Mom, today I was killed," knowing that that stomach wound is, they can't do anything for it. So they can't, but you know, it's terrible. We have some items from doctors. There's a crutch, a cane, I'm sorry. And now this is a chloroform mask. And it was used by Dr. Isaac Stearns from Stoughton. And he was a member of this post. And this is his chloroform mask that we used to knock out the soldiers. But you could just think of the pain and so forth. It's just terrible. So right here we see there's bullets right there. And they were taken from a church in Georgia. And these are all from Union soldiers. And you can see how the bullet itself, after it hits you, when it hits the bones and everything, it just crushes. So, and pieces fall off. So it's just doing terrible damage. 750,000 Americans, both sides now are American, were killed in the Civil War. And that's the latest count. it keeps going up when they review the records and so forth. Well, that's quite a few. The Battle of Gettysburg had 50,000 casualties in 3 days. Antietam, on September 17th, 1862, had 23,000 casualties, 11,000 south and 12,000 north. So it's just terrible when you think about that. As we walk around, I'm going to show you an infield musket. Okay, so in this showcase here, we do have an infield musket that I wanted to show everybody, and that did a lot of that damage to the flesh and so forth. And so this is a 58 caliber rifle musket, and the inside of the rifle was actually grooved. They were smooth bore prior to the Civil War, and and they had round shot. So whatever way that was coming out of the barrel, you can miss somebody 10 feet away, and because it could be bounced in a certain direction. So they came up with the invention of the rifle musket, which meant that the rifle means that the inside is grooved. And these bullets that would have 3 rings on them. So when you fire the rifle, the bullet will expand, and it will get into those grooves, and it will come out spinning and give you a longer distance. Also here we have a cartridge box next to the musket. You can see it right there where it says US. And below that, closer to me, is what we call a cap box. And the caps were, they looked like Abraham Lincoln's top hat, really, a copper mercury. And the way you would operate this whole thing would be, first you would buy, there's a little bag you would have this bullet in, and the bag would have black powder. So you would take the bag out of the cartridge box and bite it with your teeth, so you had to have good teeth. Bite it with your teeth, bite it off, and then take the black powder, put it in the top of the musket, and push the bullet down. And then under the musket, you see there's a ramrod, much like the cannon one right there, that I showed you earlier, but much smaller, of course. And so the ramrod, you would use that to push it all in. So to get the bullet tight and the black powder tight in there. And then, once you did all that, you would cock the hammer back, and the box right there, the cap box, you would go in there and take one of those caps. And you would put it where the hammer strikes the apparatus there. And the idea is that when the hammer came down, it would give you a spark. And that spark would ignite the black powder. And because it's a rifle, also, one direction is the explosion, it's going out. So that would push the bullet out. So that was considered a fairly accurate musket, and it was fairly modern at the time. A good soldier could do 3 shots per minute. But try doing that during the chaos of war and bullets flying every place and so forth. Now sometimes the Springfield rifles, some soldiers had Springfields. Most had the infield, but some had Springfields, and their caliber was .577. So sometimes you might load a Springfield with an infield bullet, 58 caliber, and then it would get stuck in the barrel. And there was one story about a soldier at Gettysburg. He kept firing the rifle. He thought he was doing a great job, and he was shot. They found him, he was dead. And they looked at his rifle, and he had 10 bullets in the chamber. It was making the noise, everything else, but the bullet wasn't going anyplace. So that's only because they were so close. But it was close enough to impede the Springfield rifle. So that's the stories about that. There's a lot of things I can throw in there. We got a sword right there, a cavalry saber. And can you imagine those guys on the horses waving them? And trust me, I picked that up. That's heavy. And then you see the pirates, the people on the ships going fighting in the naval battles of the war. and some of them have these big swords in their teeth. No way. But that's the movies for you. So, you know, there's no way. Here we have a ceremonial sword, and we have many of those upstairs. They're all put away now. And the altar that I'm going to show you. And so this is basically it. We have an Indian, Apache Indian whip, and that's for the horse. They would, you know, so they get riding faster, I guess, and so I just give the horse a little shot of that, and off they go. Now these were quite popular. These are tintypes, and they were relatively cheap. You can buy them for like a dime or so. So, but these soldiers would give to their family before they went off to war. There's a gentleman here, and I believe he's right over there in the end. And I think his name is Clark. But we'll look it up. Come on down, we'll look it up together. We can all do this, have fun. But anyways, he was killed. And this is a picture of him taken and put into a tintype before he was killed. So the family had a picture. A lot of families did not have photographs. Photograph was very new at the time. And so when a soldier was killed, they put the name in the family Bible, and that would be it, no picture. So there's just little tidbits we go through. So that's it. We're going to take a walk upstairs. In this showcase here, we have some of the black soldiers and sailors that belong to this post. And I wanted to show you, talk about the movie Glory. I know you've probably all seen it. And that talks about the 54th Mass. So Robert Shaw's regiment, after he was wounded at Antietam, he took over, and that was in the last part of 1862. Governor Andrew of Massachusetts had asked for black volunteers. The Civil War really, in some respects, was about slavery. All the other countries that, in Europe had abolished slavery by then. England, no more slavery. France, no more. So it was time for the United States. In here we have, these are three members that belong to the 54th Mass. And of course we know that at Boston Common, across from the State House, is the relief of the 54th Mass marching off to war. And it shows Robert Shaw on his horse, and they're marching away. So here we have this guy, this gentleman right here is John Stackhouse. And he was actually a slave in Virginia. And he made his way out of Virginia, and with help of the Underground Railroad, he finally made his way to Massachusetts. And many of these slaves were forming up in Fall River, New Bedford, that area. So he made his way to New Bedford. And when the call was put out for volunteers, he volunteered. And the other two here, Joseph Butler and James Archison, also volunteered. So they all went off to war. Butler and Archison were at Fort Wagner. The movie makes that quite famous. It was right around the time of Gettysburg, as we know. And so they were involved with the Battle of Fort Wagner. And then shortly after that battle, this gentleman right here was involved with the 54th Mass. And we know that the first black soldier that received the Medal of Honor was Connie. He belonged to the 54th. And he survived that battle. He survived the Civil War. However, the commander, Robert Shaw, did not survive. He's buried there. He was buried at Fort Wagner. And they had the military said, well, we're going to take him away from his buddies or his friends, the black soldiers that were buried there, and we're going to put him in Arlington. And the family said no, he stays with his men. So he's buried there. So that's a little history of the 54th. We also have the Navy, and these gentlemen, for the most part, were in the Navy. We have a gentleman that was with the 29th Connecticut Infantry Regiment. That's him right there. So that's the only black soldier or sailor we have that lived out of state. And he moved here in Lynn to work in the shoe industry. So being in the honorably discharged Civil War Union veteran, he could join this post, and so he did. And we have some others here. And you can see the pictures of them and so on. And when I go inside, I'll talk about the capstan in the other room there, and how a black sailor got the Medal of Honor during that battle. And for man in the, I believe it was #2 gun of the Kearsarge. Okay, so not only do we have Civil War items, we do have some Revolutionary War as well as other ones. And this is a Revolutionary uniform worn by the 11th Governor of Massachusetts, Colonel John Brooks. That's his Revolutionary uniform. Quite interesting. The buttons all have the symbol for Massachusetts on them. So it's, and he's also from Medford, Massachusetts. So we have that here. Moving along, we come to this showcase here, and here we have a powder horn, and there's a few more artifacts here. We also have a Revolutionary War fighter, and that would be used by the drummer boys when they were marching off to war. And you think about it, some of those boys were 9, 10, 11 years old. So, and their job, for the most part, was to lead the regiment into battle, or into the vicinity of the battle. When the shooting started, they would go to the rear and tend to the horses, and then when the fighting stopped, they would help tend the wounded, bring the wounded back. So it's just a terrible thing for, you think on 10, 11, 12-year-old kid to see, but they, nonetheless, they saw that. Recently here in the museum, we had our current mayor, G.A.R. visit the museum, and we found his relative in the walls. We have quite a few people that come by and looking for people that, from their family, their history, that served in the war between the North and the South, the Civil War. So G.A.R. came in, and we found his great relative, great-grandfather, I think 3 grades or 4 grades, whatever, Benjamin Peach, who was a colonel with the 8th Mass Infantry as part of the 1st Call Regiment. And so after that, a month or 2 later, he came back and gave us a little speech about his grandfather, as we gave him a picture of him done over. So, and that's the mayor, that's Benjamin Peach, and there you go. I just want to point that out because I find that very interesting. In this display, we have all 7 Lynn Mays that belong to this organization. The first one to join right after the Civil War is Roland G. Usher, and his picture's over here. He was a paymaster, and believe it or not, that would be, well, it's like a god to some of them, because he had the money. If you want your $13 per month regimental pay, you would have to see the paymaster. We do have his uniform in the building, and he was the 11th mayor of Lynn. So we have the 11th governor of Massachusetts and the 11th mayor of Lynn. So all these 7 were members of this post. Many councilors and so on became members of the organization. And really, if you want to get elected, you really should, if you've served in the Civil War, become a member, because they will help you get elected. eventually that faded away, like most things do. But I wanted to give you an idea. And so all these gentlemen went off to war, and they served our country, and they served our city afterwards as mayors. Okay, so we are now in the G.A.R. room, and I want to show you the uniform of Roland G. Usher, who became the 11th mayor of Lynn. As we know, it was the first one right after the Civil War, 1866. So this is his uniform. You can see it's red. So he was an officer, paymaster, as we know. And along here we have, this is the 11th mayor, Roland G. Usher. And this is 1866. And we have other uniforms here. So I just want to give you an idea of what his uniform looked like. Okay, so something else of interest in the G.A.R. room. Now this, you're lucky because you got to see this before we go in the room. And it's changed a little bit since way back then. Not much, but a little bit. But here is the main hall that we're going to go in next after here. And you can see they got the chandeliers up here. And actually, electricity was invented just about the time this building was built. So when it was built in 1885, dedicated 1886, they had gas lamps. And each gas lamp, each globe had 2 gas jets. So you just imagine when them meeting in here with just gas lights on. And so even some of the houses in the Highlands today have gas jets coming out of the walls. And so anyway, so this is, so they experimented with electricity, visited with Thomas Edison, and formed a company called the Lynn Electric Light Company that visited Thomas Edison, and they got the idea for the lights. So the first lights were direct current, DC lights, and you can see here, it shows these are the gas lamps and the electric lights. And we have some pictures showing both on at the same time. So that was quite a thing to see, I would imagine. And it might have been a little bit dangerous. But we're still here, so thank God for that. So in this showcase here, we have a few more things. Now, when these soldiers returned, some of them, when they joined the post, had somebody write about their experiences. And so what they did, they had the gentleman with the best handwriting sit down and interview the soldiers and sailors. And so we have 4 of these books. But here, the soldiers talk about their experiences. So there's about 800 some odd entries. We had just about 2,000, just under. They belong to this post. And we have a few pictures in the other room that we'll show you. So, so this is the personal war sketchbook. This gentleman right here, Thomas Corson, I want to mention him. Thomas Corson was the last survivor. And he died during the Battle of the Bulge. People look at me like, what do you mean the Battle of the Bulge? He died in 1944, December, at the age of 104. Imagine that. 7 years before he died, he was hit by an automobile. And he just got up swearing at the driver with his cane. So he was a tough old dude. He was actually shot in the chest. And the bullet went into the button. The button went into his body and the bullet fell out. And throughout his life, he lived with that button in his chest. So the doctors really didn't think he was going to live that long. He outlived everybody. So he's the last one from this post. The last one in the country, we know, died in 1957. And the last northern one, I think it was 1954, right around there. So, so they're all gone today. I wanted to show you this right here. This is a group that meets here now. And so these are members of the Sons of Erie Veterans. and their job is to carry on the Civil War. So they actually joined the sons of the G.A.R, of the Civil War veterans. So this is Charles R. Mudge Camp #1. This is around 1900. So these guys, you see they're quite young. The other gentleman in 1900 would be quite, looking quite old. So these are mostly sons of the men that went off to war. So you recall the badge I showed you downstairs for the Robert E. Lee camp when the soldiers all got together, both sides. And there are other badges, usually for an encampment or whatever. And in this showcase, we have a few of those. And we also have the women's post. And they became quite strong here, the ladies. After they took care of the dilemma with the bookcase, they were recognized as being very important. They are. So, but this is from the ladies' post. This will be the men's post, Winchester, Virginia. So these are all different types of medals that they would have received going to these encampments and so on. Okay. As we move along. Okay, so here we have, we think it's General Landers saddle. And you can see it's one of the things, now there were many inventions during the Civil War, as we know. But one of them was that the cavalry would be on the horses first thing in the morning at 5 a.m. and sit there for quite a while. So the poor horse has to have some sort of air conditioning. So they came up with the idea of cutting the inside of the saddle out. Prior to the Civil War, they were just a saddle that the entire thing was enclosed. So this would give the horse a little breathing room anyways. So this is a saddle, and what I understand that the saddle was actually made from the insides of a cow's stomach. So this would be for General Lander, as well as these boots here. And these were his boots. And of course he was shot at Paw, Virginia, and he died shortly thereafter of wounds. Prior to the Civil War, he was out in Wyoming as a trailblazer, as a surveyor. And Lander, Wyoming is actually named after him. And there's also a path, the Lander Path, that goes from Wyoming to California, that the old pioneers took. And so his name's out there in Wyoming. So over here, so here we have a few more items from the G.A.R. post itself. And you recall downstairs I mentioned that it took them 19 years to come up with the $30,000 that it cost them buy this land, build this building. And so they had to rent space someplace. So here we have space they rented over here. And you see very patriotic. And this is before the horseless buggy they say, the automobile. And you can see the horse right there, the carriage. And it's the same picture here, very patriotic, so on. This is City Hall before they put the new one up in 1947. And the new one is dedicated to the World War II veterans. So, and we have other pictures here. So there's a bunch of pictures here you can take a look at. We also have, this is a picture of John G.B. Adams. And I'm going to show you his picture in the other room. He's one of 2 Medal of Honor recipients that belong to this post. John G.B. Adams, right there, and William B. Poole. And John Adams received the Medal of Honor for actions at Fredericksburg. And during the Battle of Fredericksburg, the color bearers, the ones holding the flags, both the Union flag and the regimental flag, were killed. And so John G.B. Adams, seeing that the regiment was in total chaos, because the regiment would look for the flags, they would know where to form up. So seeing that, he grabbed the flags and he ran to a small hill and he put the flags up in the air, and doing that saved the regiment. So for that action, he received the Medal of Honor. Another thing about John G.A.R. He was really involved with the first amphibious assault in history. And when they went across the river there to attack the Confederates on the other side. And they did it as an amphibious assault. So it's just something that, yeah. And he was also involved with the first idea of street fighting. And they were fighting along the Fredericksburg in the town and so forth. I've been there, it's quite something. But anyway, so John G.A.R. went through quite a lot. He became the quartermaster, or the guy at the State House. And they found him at his desk right around 1900. He passed away, and they found him there. So he was quite the hero. He did an awful lot for these soldiers and sailors in regards to pensions. And he wrote to Washington, D.C. many a time on behalf of these gentlemen, so they can get their rightful pension. So we are about to enter the main hall. And to do that, we have to turn on the lights. And I just want to give you a brief idea of what happened here. The Thompson-Houston Electric Light Company installed these lights right after they did the gas, which became the Lead Electric Light Company. The two were within together. But so these things were very elementary. These are the lights, and it's voltage equals current times resistance. So the more resistance you got, the more voltage with the current. So that's the basic formula for that. It was direct current at first. So here we have the light switch to get into that room. 20 switches altogether. So there's 10 on and there's 10 off. And believe me, I know that because I had the school children here a few years back, second grade kids here. And they love the place and everything, but they're kind of young for this museum until we got up to here. And then when they saw this, and they saw me start putting them on with this key here, they got pretty well excited. So I had to pick up each child so they can put on the light and they could turn it off and see. And you're looking there. So these are the lights. So when you come back, I can pick you up too. You can do the same thing. So as we go into here, okay, this is the main hall, and there were 1,243 photographs on the walls. We had almost 2,000 members. But if you look around, you can see they basically ran out of space. But many of the men that I already mentioned, Roland G. Usher, Thomas Corson, John G.B. Adams, and so forth, are here in this room. So as we look around, you can see those chandeliers that I showed to you earlier. And that's now those gas lamps are lights. And you can see the bulbs and so on. But, you know, as you know, one time it was gas, and those rings were the gas shutoffs. So to turn the gas on, somebody would come up here, usually just the guide or a sergeant at arms, and he would turn those gas jets, and on another pole, somebody right with them would make sure they light the gas that's coming out. So that's how they were lit. And this right here was actually open to the elements through side windows, so that all this gas, you won't fall asleep. It would escape. So you needed to get the gas out of it. But we do have, I could tell you about so many photographs on the walls here. Now the uniform that I showed you from Roland Usher, you recall the paymaster, he had the red uniform, and his photograph's right over here. So Roland G. Usher is the third from the right, and the second from the bottom going up. And so that was the 11th mayor of the city of Lynn. There's a funny thing right above him. You see that to the left? And that's actually a gas jet. And they would have lights on the walls as well as on the ceilings there. But they didn't last too long. And hopefully all the gas is dead. So, and you recall the last gentleman I mentioned who died during the Battle of the Bulge in 1944. And that's Thomas Corson right there. The third from the right and the third from the top going down. So he died in December of that year. And I had a high school class here one time. I gave them sort of a little test just to see. I've had it here for many years. So the first time I had them, I said to them, he died during the Battle of the Bulge. And so they didn't know when that was. So when they came the next year, I did the same thing. And the teacher, very good teacher, had them ready. So they asked, oh, he died during World War II, Battle of the Bulge. You know, so he died in 1944, they told me. So that's right, 1944. So anyway, so he was the oldest from this organization. So that's Thomas Corson. And I can talk about so many people here. We have a gentleman over there in the far corner. You know, sometimes when one of these gentlemen would pass away, they will have the wakes up here. And they will wake the person right there by the capstan. So they had to bring up a coffin and put the gentleman in there. And they had their wakes. And right over there, the third from the left, is Old McLaughlin. And he died of consumption. That was what they said on the records. At the age of 55. Imagine that. And he was waked here. We actually have a photograph of him in his coffin. And that photograph is the same as this one. So you can see he was just dying again on the walls. And there he is, Old McLaughlin. Third from the right there. So, and there's so much more we can talk about here. But this, just to give everybody an idea of what's here. John Stackhouse, I mentioned earlier, and he was with the 54th Mass. He's the second from the bottom, far right. So just look around there, go up one, and go to your right. When the war started, our governor of Massachusetts, Governor Andrew, had given the orders that he would like to have regiments of all black volunteers. So the line was out the door. It was a very long line to sign up. So they actually signed up 2 regiments. And the 54th we know of because of Fort Wagner, and also because at Boston Commons, right across from the Boston State House, is a relief statue of the 54th going to battle, commanded by Robert Shaw, who's on horseback. So that's, and then many joined the 55th Mass. And then others joined, of course, when you went in the Navy, you could join right away. And some of them went in the Navy too, just to, they just wanted to fight. But we're fighting for them. That's what they said, you know, that's what they believed. And it's the truth, you think about it. So, but anyway, so that is John Stackhouse. All right, so here we have what we call a capstan. And this is what would be on the naval ships, and you would actually pick up the anchor. And the anchor would weigh about 6 tons, which is 12,000 pounds. So you would have sailors with poles, and this whole thing would move. This was aboard the USS Kearsarge, and there's a photograph right over here of the Kearsarge. And it's in the back there, and the battle between the Kearsarge and the Alabama. So all the people heard about this battle to be the night before, because of the single flags and so forth. So they all came out to the beach to watch the battle. And the Kearsarge sunk the Alabama, but during that, Alabama scored a direct hit right above the rudder of the Kearsarge. And it's a picture right here of that. And you can see there's a 100-pound cannonball, and it was below the feet of William B. Poole, who's the other Medal of Honor recipient. And seeing that cannonball, he stayed at his duty station. He drove the ship. He was the quartermaster, and right below him was that 100-pounder. If it exploded, he was gone. So, but luckily the powder was wet. So they really scored the first decisive hit. But the Kearsarge was able to overcome that. So because of that action, he received the Medal of Honor, and that's William B. Poole. There's another gentleman, and his name is Benjamin Falls, and he died during the war, so he never became a veteran, never became a member of this post. And he is buried at Pine Grove Cemetery. He's the second one in the lot. In fact, they just restored his grave marker not too long ago. And so he received the Medal of Honor for capturing the enemy's flag. So you can get it for saving the flag like John G.B. Adams did, or for capturing the enemy's flag like Benjamin Falls. So that's his story. But we have so much history here we could talk about. And on the walls here, there's so much. Well, I hope you enjoyed the tour, especially putting up with me for the last hour or whatever. But we can really get into this. There's so much to talk about. But this is a brief idea of what we have. There's so much more I can mention. But thank you very much.